All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Laura Plummer, and I am the statewide Assistive Technology Program Coordinator with WISTEC, Wisconsin's Assistive Technology Program. And I'm excited for today's webinar on assistive technology and supporting mental health. So we'll do a little bit of housekeeping here before we kick off today's session. So this is a webinar platform, which means that your cameras and your microphones are automatically muted and off. And so we encourage you to use the chat or the Q&A for any questions or interactions. This webinar is brought to you by WISTEC, Wisconsin's ATA program, as well as Department of Health Services and the Bureau of Aging and Disability Resources. So we do offer CRCs, which is Certified Rehab Counselor Credits, and CEUs. And in order to get those, you will need to attend the full webinar, and then there will be a survey that pops up after the webinar with a few questions. So if you complete that, then you'll be on the list to get the CRCs and CEUs. If you miss your chance to do the survey right after the webinar, you will get that in email tomorrow. You only need to do that once. So if you do it after the webinar, you can just ignore that email tomorrow. We do have closed captioning services available for today's webinar. Those are accessed on the menu item at the bottom. We also have sign language interpreting, and so you are welcome to utilize that. And I believe that would be the bulk of our housekeeping. So again, thank you for joining today, and I am going to welcome Cassie Frost to share her wealth of knowledge today. Cassie, I should also share, is a member of our statewide Assistive Technology Advisory Council. So she contributes in many ways to assistive technology throughout Wisconsin. And Cassie, I will let you give a little more in-depth introduction for yourself. But thank you very much for your time today, and looking forward to hearing what you have to share.
Thank you so very much. I'm excited to be here, and thank you to WISTEC to having me to be able to spend some time talking about this really important topic. So again, my name is Cassie Frost. I am a assistive technology professional. A little bit of background: I started as a special education teacher for about 15 years before discovering what assistive technology could do for the students that I worked with. And that sort of made me fall in love, and I kind of went deep down that rabbit hole. I supported a school district here in Wisconsin for about 6 years with assistive technology before sort of broadening the service area that I work with, and now work independently, providing assistive technology supports around the state of Wisconsin. As Laura said, I work with the Assistive Technology Council. I am a RESNA certified ATP. I do a lot of work with the Council for Exceptional Children, and I'm sure I'm missing some things in there. I tend to end up in a lot of different areas. So today we're here to talk about assistive technology specifically to supporting mental health. This is an area that has always been and will remain a huge need as we move forward. So especially as, you know, this seems very timely. I'm loving the timeline here. As we're going into fall, especially those of us in the northern latitudes, we start seeing, you know, less sun, more cold. We're not outside as much. We start seeing more mental health needs during this time of year. We also start noticing we've got students going back to school. So we've got not only students dealing with additional stressors in their day, but also families who are trying to navigate that. So a lot of times mental health needs sort of seem to crop up or become more noticeable this time of year. Not that they're not always there, but this is just a really good time of year to be talking about this. So on the screen right now, there is a QR code. If you prefer to follow along with the slide deck, it's there. I know Laura also sent out handouts in advance, but I always like having an option there if you prefer having the slide deck as well. Okay, as we go through today, we sort of have a broad agenda that we're going to follow. Now, as far as this webinar goes, if you have any questions, please feel free to put those into the Q&A or the chat. If you put it into the chat, it is possible. If people are talking back and forth, I'll miss it. I will try to monitor chat. I'm usually fairly good at it. But if it's a specific question about something that we're talking about, toss that one into the Q&A. That way I'm sure I'll catch it, because we will make sure before we end today that we have gone through everything in that Q&A. Okay. So if it's a comment or an idea, feel free to use the chat for that. But if it's a question and you really want to make sure that I don't miss it in any regard, go ahead and toss that into the Q&A. If it makes sense, and I spot it and it's making sense with the flow, I will answer those right away. If for some reason I'm not answering that right away, it may be because we're going to be addressing it in a little bit. Okay, but definitely feel free to use that chat and Q&A to interact today. So our agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about mental health. Now, if you're here, odds are you have a pretty good working understanding, but we want to make sure that we're all sort of on the same page as we start this conversation. We're going to take a little bit of time to talk about mental health and executive functioning. We're going to talk about a lifespan view. So from, birth through, 99 plus, we want to talk about how assistive technology and mental health can work together. We're going to touch on feature matching, because as I'm going through and showing some tools today, we want to make sure that we're matching the right tool with the right person. And then we're sort of going to get into the part that most people consider the more fun part of these presentations. We're going to actually talk about some apps, some extensions, some wearables, some tools for supporting mental health. So today, our learning objectives. By the time we're done today, I want to make sure that you can identify at least 3 ways that assistive technology can support mental health. I want to make sure that you can compare and contrast at least 5 different assistive technology supports. You're going to walk away with more than that, but it's good to have an objective. And we also want to make sure that you're able to discuss the potential barriers and some of the pitfalls of using high-tech AT to support mental health. Because while we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about the high-tech tools, we need to be aware of where that could go wrong or how we need to use those so that we don't end up making things worse instead of better. So the very first thing today, I want to talk a little bit about mental health and what we're talking about in this presentation. So it's important to know that mental health has kind of become a term that we use for a lot of things. We talk about, mental health walks, getting outside, going for a walk, exercise being good for our mental health. That's all very true. But we want to actually make sure that we know when we're talking about assistive technology to support mental health, what are we talking about? Well, areas that we typically end up seeing that people need support with ends up being things like anxiety or depression. Okay, those kind of tend to be the 2 big, broad categories, right? People are feeling anxious, people are feeling depressed. Things just aren't working well in their life. They may be going to counseling, they may be dealing with some sort of mental health medication, they may be working with a physician, or they may be trying to manage this on their own. From an assistive technology standpoint, our goal is to try to find tools that can help people manage this better. When people are experiencing things like anxiety or depression or other mental health challenges, we might start seeing things like withdrawal, where people don't necessarily want to interact in ways that they might have in the past. Sometimes this can be work avoidance, people that are suddenly not showing up to work. People aren't coming, to events or family gatherings. Right? Sometimes this can go as far as people that just are having a hard time getting out of bed in the morning, right? They're withdrawing from everything that's going on. A lot of times when I will get a phone call is when we're seeing the next couple, which are anger. So this is somebody that is maybe having some outbursts, or they seem like they are more tense than usual. Right? That tends to get people to pay attention. If all of a sudden somebody is yelling at you and they aren't normally somebody that does a lot of yelling, okay, we probably know something's going on there. Also frustration. And that frustration can end up leading to that anger and that withdrawal, right? When somebody's struggling with mental health, a lot of times they're frustration tolerance can be significantly lower than normal. So they might be frustrated by simple things that, normally wouldn't have bothered them, or they might be frustrated by things all the time that you think, well, that's not that big of a deal, right? And so a lot of times we'll work with ways to try to help people manage frustrations so that they can move through their days more easily. As you can imagine here, this is sort of, you're kind of noticing this is kind of snowballing here a little. If somebody is feeling anxious or dealing with depression or dealing with other mental health struggles, and we start seeing withdrawal or anger or frustration, that causes a huge, huge impact on their social connections. So, as a person, each one of us choose who we spend our time with. And we choose typically to spend time with people that make us feel good and safe and comfortable. And if somebody's struggling with mental health needs and they're maybe having outbursts or they're canceling plans with us or they're shutting down, right? Or they're appearing very frustrated with whatever event we're going to or doing, we tend to start separating ourselves a little bit from that relationship. And that's a very natural thing to keep, each person safe. However, that has a huge impact on social connections. And we know now more than ever, we've had this wonderful life experiment going on in the last, 5 years where social connections were a little different there for a while, right? Everything was kind of through a computer. We know that social connections are so incredibly important, not just for our day to day, but for our mental health. When people don't have solid social connections, that can actually cause a decline in mental health, which then can lead to anxiety and depression, which that then can lead to strain on social connections. So we end up with this sort of wheel of miserableness, right? And it just keeps going. So the goal here when we're talking about supports today is to try to find ways to sort of break that. Now, as we go through supports today, there is no magic assistive technology tool that is magically going to erase somebody's anxiety or depression. We do not have an assistive technology tool that is going to repair every social connection, but we can put in place some supports that help people with the things that they're struggling with, which then in turn will help them be in a better place to work on their social connections. Now, as we talk about mental health, it's also important to acknowledge that there's sort of going to be a couple of different timelines when we're talking about mental health. There are some people who have long-term mental health needs. These are typically people who are working with a physician or a counselor. These are diagnoses that they have that they are working through, and they may need supports for mental health long-term. And those are times where they may start with one of the tools that I'm going to talk about today, and it may really help for a while. And we might need to switch to a different tool over time. Because, like anything else, as you sort of get used to it, it might become something more background. So we may need layers of mental health support so that long term, we've got different levels of sort of safety nets and supports to help their mental health needs. We also have individuals that we work with that have short-term mental health needs. So think about people who are going through a divorce or are dealing with a sudden illness, are dealing with a family member who's dealing with a severe illness, or a family member who is in hospice, right? We can also see struggles here if somebody is sick, if somebody is dealing with a financial strain, right? Anything like that can cause more of a short-term mental health need. Now, there are a lot of us, as we go through some of the tools today, you guys are probably going to start thinking, oh, I've used that. I've done that. Because for many people, when you deal with short-term mental health needs, you sort of reach out to tools that you know about, things that a friend tells you, and you are likely going to reach out and try something to support your mental health during that time period. And then once you don't need it anymore, you might just let it go by the wayside and pick it up again when you need it. So oftentimes for short-term needs, some people will just naturally gravitate to the supports that they need to get them through that period. However, Some people do need additional support in identifying those tools. Okay, so even if it's for a short term, they may need help sort of building their toolbox in order to find the tools that they need for this. Okay, so let's go ahead and kind of tie this in. So if you hear me talk a lot, you know I talk about executive functioning a lot. And you're going to hear me tie it in here because it's a huge contributing factor. So when we're talking about executive functioning, just a quick reminder, we're talking about memory, attention, time management, organization, sort of all of those underlying things that help us get ready to do the things that we need to do. And this is another one of those cause and effect sort of snowball situations. We know that people who are struggling with mental health, right, anxiety and depression, other mental health conditions, those are going to cause additional stress on your executive functioning system. Inversely, if you struggle with executive functioning, that can cause and or exacerbate anxiety, depression, interpersonal difficulties. So these often go hand in hand. So while today I'm not going to focus specifically in on executive functioning for a long period of time, I want you to keep this in the back of your head. And we are going to talk about some tools here. But I want you to think about how these two things work together. Because oftentimes, just like we notice frustration or anger, one of the other first signs that we'll see that someone is struggling with mental health is if their executive functioning system starts failing. So think about your family, your friends, think about the people you work with, and think about when suddenly somebody kind of sort of starts dropping the ball. Right? So maybe all of a sudden someone is showing up to work late and they don't normally, or somebody starts forgetting the materials they needed for work that day, or you're doing a group project and their part isn't getting done, right? They're struggling somewhere. And likely their organization system isn't doing as well, their time management system isn't doing as well. And that could be because a wide variety of scenarios. But those things are going to lead to people perceiving them differently, which can cause more anxiety, which can cause more depression. And again, this can snowball very, very quickly. Again, just kind of thinking about that, I just had a picture that I was thinking of with the idea of, you are working on a group project with someone and they forget their part of it or a couple of slides. Well, how do you feel towards that person, right? Your stress level goes up. You're maybe not as nice to them. Now they're feeling bad about themselves. They're going home. They're feeling down. Now they're forgetting something else. So again, this can become a really big snowball very quickly. So a lot of the examples that I just talked about were sort of adult focused, but it's important for us to recognize that mental health needs can be found from early childhood all the way through the lifespan. And it's important to recognize that mental health needs may change over that lifespan. So while we may have somebody who's never had any significant mental health concerns, they may develop those over time. And that can be due to a medical diagnosis change. That can be due to an illness. That can be due to a support system change. So think about, the teenager who moves school districts, right? Their families moved. Now, all of a sudden, they don't have their friends. They don't have their support system. They're starting over. Some teenagers are going to do great with that. Some are really going to struggle, right? And we may see some mental health needs there. As people get older, if they move for a job, if they lose a job, right? All of these are triggering factors that may exacerbate the need for some supports for mental health. We also have individuals who need long-term support. So we have people who have long-term diagnoses of anxiety or depression or bipolar or ADHD or autism or this just goes on. The number of diagnoses that affect mental health is huge. And it's important for us to know that in addition to supporting any form of medical need, we also acknowledge that these things all affect mental health and keep an eye out for when people need support with the mental health aspect of it. Again, like I said, some are just going to need short-term support. It's also important to acknowledge here, and this is kind of an interesting one, what works during one phase of life might not work in another. And some of them come back around. So think about a child. We're thinking about someone maybe 5, 6, 7 years old, and they're maybe feeling really sad, and they're looking kind of, depressed and are struggling with overwhelm. What might we do? Right? How might we address that? Toss that in the chat. How might we address that if we've got a child, 5, 6, 7 years old who is dealing with some mental health stuff? They're really sad, they're withdrawing, they don't really want to go to the park. What might we do to help some mental health stuff there? There are no wrong answers.
This is Laura. Please feel free to use the chat to
There we go. We're coming
give
in.
some ideas.
Yeah, so we've got, it looks like we're starting off with some hugs, joke, tickling, play and play therapy. Show up and allow safe spaces. Yes. So we're going to feel free to keep throwing them in. Hugs. Yep. Find a shared interest and explore. Absolutely listening. So what's really interesting here about your examples is some of these examples are going to work really, really, really well for a child, and they might not work as well for an adult. And some of these might work kind of across the lifespan. So it's important for us to acknowledge that some things are going to work really well in different phases of life, and some might work across the board. So hugs, joke, tickling, if we're working with a 5-year-old, may have one effect. If we show up to our cousin's house who is maybe 55 and is dealing with depression and some withdrawal and they haven't come to work, you're not probably going to walk in their house and start hugging and joking with them and tickling them, right? Now, if you have a certain relationship, maybe, but it's not probably your go-to. So again, as we're talking about tools today, it's important to know that certain tools may work in one phase of life, but they might not work in another. Now, that being said, showing up, allowing safe space, listening, shared interests, those are kind of universal tools, right? We know that those tend to work for everybody, making them feel safe. Now, the last thing, kind of as we're talking about lifetime, is really focusing in on the skills that we're teaching people and how we're teaching them to use the tools. That's because a lot of the tools that we're going to talk about for supporting mental health may change over time. We're going to talk about some low-tech things today that stay a little more consistent. But once we start talking about apps or extensions or websites, we know that those can disappear tomorrow, right? A lot of times, even by the time I create a presentation to the time that I do the presentation, some of the tools have already changed or disappeared even. And that's because that's all sort of at the whims of developers and how that, their process is working. So instead of really focusing in on this being the one tool that's going to help the person or be the assistive technology for the individual with the mental health needs, we need to make sure that in addition to providing a tool, we're really focusing on the skills of using the tool. What features of the tool are helping the person? And how are we helping them interact with that tool? That becomes important then later, because if that tool disappears or changes, we know what features of that tool are necessary, and we know that we have supported the learning of the skill to use the tool. Okay, so it can be transitioned then into the next one. Because I would pretty much guarantee that the tools that we're going to talk about today, if we're talking lifespan in 30 years, probably aren't still going to be the tools that people are going to have available to them. So that's where our feature matching comes in. And anytime I do a session like this, where we're going to spend a significant amount of time talking about fun tools, we want to make sure that we are addressing the idea of feature matching. So we need to make sure that we are focusing on the function over the fun. Now, that being said, a lot of mental health apps, websites, tools are fun. They're geared to make them easy to use. If it's something that is boring or dull or repetitive or hard to use, somebody who's already struggling is not likely to jump right in and start using it. So fun is important here. Novelty is important here. But to make sure that we're not just latching onto an app, for example, because it has a really cute character in it. And I'm going to show you a couple today that have some really cute characters in them. But that's not the reason we want to say, hey, this is the best app for you because it has these cute characters, right? The other part here is I want to just take a second to talk about the set process. So if you do work with assistive technology, you have heard this phrase likely many, many, many times. This is sort of a standard assessment process for assistive technology, and it tends to be geared for students. However, the same process is important anytime we are looking at assistive technology and matching that to the individual we're working with. So the first S in SET, or the only S in SET, first letter, is student. In this case, we're going to say, or adult, or child, or person, the person that we're working with. So this is meaning we want to know that person, understand what are they struggling with? What are they good at? What skills do they have? Right? If we're working with somebody who is really nervous around technology and high-tech tools, we probably don't want to go with a high-tech tool, right? If they are really anxious about trying to remember multiple devices with them in a day, we probably don't want something that's going to add an extra tool to their world, right? So we want to know the person. The E then goes for environment. Where do we need the tool to work? So when we're talking about mental health, a lot of times we're talking about something maybe that somebody is using at home. But if somebody is struggling significantly with anxiety and that is showing up a lot at work because there's so many projects going on at work and there's so many people and so many social interactions, then we need to make sure that that tool is also going to work at work. One thing we run into a lot is we have employers who don't believe or allow cell phones in the office space. Well, if we have found a really great tool to support somebody's mental health, but it's on their phone and now they can't take it out at work to use it, then we need to also look at an additional tool for the work environment, or we need to look at a completely different tool that's going to work in all of the environments. So just finding something that somebody likes and works is great, but we need to make sure that it works where we need it to work. Okay. Then we need to pay attention to what task needs to be accomplished, and that's the first T. So what are we actually trying to do? If you go to any extension store or app store or website or do a Google search or, anything like that, you are going to find really good advertisements, right? That's what the companies that create these high-tech tools do. They're trying to sell them, they're trying to get them in front of people. And so the advertisements are great, and they're going to tell you this tool can do all of these many different things. But it's important for us to know before we go start looking for those, what actually has to be accomplished. Is this person dealing with anxiety overall, but it's really struggling the most because they're afraid they're going to forget to take the things they need with them to work each day? Okay, so then the task specifically at this point may be that we are looking for some form of reminder app to help them remember to take the things with them to work. Or maybe we're going to look at some sort of low-tech checklist that goes by a back door to help decrease the anxiety in that scenario. So taking a step back, instead of just looking at all of the things that different programs and apps and tools say that they can provide, we need to be able to look back and say, what actually do we need to accomplish? Maybe we're not addressing anxiety as a whole. Maybe we're addressing anxiety about specific situations. And then we need to find the tools that go with that. And then the final T comes in, and that's where we look at the tools. That's where we step back and say, okay, we now know the person. We know what they're good at. We know what they're struggling with. We know the environment. We know where these tools need to support. We know where the person needs help. We now know what we actually need to accomplish with our tool. Then we can start looking at our tools. Now, as we go through today, especially the second half of this presentation, I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about tools because if you're here today, you know that you are needing some additional things in your toolbox. So we're going to talk about the tools. We're going to talk about a lot of different things that you can use. And I'm not necessarily going to walk through this entire process every time, right? But I want to make sure that you are sort of knowing that you need to do this in the background so that when you are looking at a tool, you know if it's the right one for the right person. Now, we've talked a little bit, and I keep saying the words apps and extensions and things like that, because when we talk about mental health tools, we tend to be pretty good at the low-tech ones. I think it's because sort of it's what most people just sort of grab. Well, okay, I changed that. Most people over a certain age grab when they need some mental health support. If we're talking about students of today and up into, late teens, maybe even some early 20s, they may actually go for some of the high-tech things first. And some of us even may get in the habit of grabbing our cell phones to play some repetitive game when we're feeling a little like we need some mental health help. Yeah, may have been doing that myself a little bit, so I get it. But we tend to overall be better at the low tech things. So when we're going through supports today, I am going to spend more time focused on the high tech tools because they're each a little more unique. So I want to kind of build your toolbox there. But before we go into those, we need to talk about why might we consider low tech and or high tech tools. So the first thing is we want to be aware of kind of the difference between engagement and fun when we're talking about low tech versus high tech. So most individuals are going to sort of find a novelty or more engagement with some high tech tools. This is why social media designers and creators are so good at what they do. This is why social media is such a thing. It's engaging, it's fun, it's a distraction, right? It's something that you can go to forget what you're dealing with. Now, that kind of is the high tech end of things. However, low tech, especially if it's novel, can be a really good go-to. If you have an individual who spends a lot of time on high tech, maybe they're on their phone a lot, they are, on the computer a lot for work, they may benefit and be more engaged with some low tech tools because it's different than what they spend a good majority of their time with, right? And again, that's where it comes back to knowing the person. Also, when we're talking about a distraction, again, it depends on if somebody's really enjoying the low tech. I've worked with many people that we work on different art projects, right? Because it's very engaging to them. They really get wrapped up in that and sort of have an opportunity to sort of disengage from some of the other things that are going on in their world. Now, again, saying artwork really doesn't necessarily cross that line into assistive technology. But it definitely can become when we run into people who no longer can do the things they enjoy due to a disability. So this is one of those kind of crossover areas. If somebody really had painting was really a passion area, and they have a disability now that does not allow them to hold a paintbrush in a way they used to, that can take away a whole level of mental health supports for them. And it actually can make mental health struggles worse. So in that case, the assistive technology may be the adaptive tools to be able to do the low tech activity that the person used to enjoy. Okay. Now, when we're talking about, again, low tech versus high tech, we also want to talk about ease of access. So when we're talking about low tech, we might be talking about things like coloring or fidgets or some form of arts and crafts. If somebody doesn't already have a computer, a tablet, an iPad, a phone, those low-tech tools tend to be easier to access. They also tend to be easier to access in environments like schools and at work. So it's pretty acceptable during some downtime to have a coloring page out, right? Adult coloring books are definitely a thing. And that's pretty acceptable to have at a break time, right? And it's something that we can easily grab. It's low cost, and that's wonderful. However, if you have somebody who is working at a job where they're in a vehicle all day and they're moving from place to place, pulling out a coloring book and crayons probably isn't going to work as well. We may be needing to look at that high tech. So again, that's that environment piece. Where is the person going to be? And how is that going to affect if we're looking at low or high tech? When we look at cost, this one's interesting because it used to be that low tech was always more cost effective than high tech. So helping someone get a coloring sheet and some really cool, funky markers and working through the process of coloring when they're feeling overwhelmed and stressed is a lot cheaper than buying a tablet. However, in today's world, most people, it's fairly rare that I run into someone now that does not have some access to a high-tech tool, a tablet, a computer, a Chromebook, a phone. If they already have that, then it becomes a little bit of a different conversation about cost because it may actually be cheaper to find a coloring app on the device for somebody than it is to buy the coloring book and cool markers. So again, cost is a little bit different now when we're talking about low and high tech. We're also coming into a world now where a lot of the mental health tools and a lot of the mental health apps have become subscription based. So that's also something we have to consider when we're looking at what we're recommending for somebody. Because where it used to be you could spend $5, buy an app and have it, now a lot of mental health apps now require ongoing subscriptions. So we have to determine when we're making this recommendation if there's funding to continue to purchase that on a monthly or yearly basis for the person to continue to use it. Okay. And then this last one becomes big as we talk about that social piece. We talk about perception. So again, if somebody is dealing with mental health needs, so they are struggling with anxiety, depression, withdrawal, right, frustration, and they need to develop some sort of self-regulation, some mental health support, some calming things. We also need to be aware of what is the perception of the tools that we're asking that person to use. So again, if we look, there's a picture on the upper, to my right of the screen with somebody that's using one of those like pop fidgets, right, where you can pop the bubbles back and forth through. Now, that may be something that works really well for some people, right? It's like reusable bubble wrap. It just keeps popping back and forth forever or until somebody steals it from you and, you know. Anyway, so if you have that tool and it works really well for someone, that's great. However, if that person maybe works in a bank loan office and they're feeling stressed during a meeting and they're dealing with anxiety in a certain scenario there, it may be perceived sort of odd for them to pull out a bright rainbow colored pop tool in the middle of a meeting or in the middle of a professional setting. Now, again, if that's perceived as being sort of odd or off, it may make people sort of avoid that person. It may make them kind of be teased a little bit, which then is going to start that cycle we talked about earlier, where now you're avoiding more because people are laughing at you. So again, we need to be aware of what the perception is. More and more, the high-tech tools like phones and tablets are becoming perceived as more of an okay thing to pull out, right? When you are being stressed or when mental health is a struggle or when you're feeling sad or, you know, this is becoming more and more acceptable to use the high-tech things in adult environments. Okay.
Cassie, this is Laura.
Yeah,
I have a funny example because you mentioned loan officers.
absolutely.
So we've done a few different, loans throughout our marriage. And our loan officer, who we worked with routinely, when he was stressed, he literally had a little tiny glue stick on his desk and he would pick it up and he would just sniff it a little bit. You know, he'd wave it under his nose, almost like smelling salts. But he just owned it. He said, you know, this is your situation is complicated, and this is my little therapy. I just pick my glue stick up and I sniff it, and then he sets it back down. And we worked with him for many, many years, and I have no doubt that he is still got a little glue stick on his desk.
That is absolutely amazing. Absolutely love that he owned what he needed and just said, yeah, this is what I do that works for me. I think that is amazing. I was just also looking in the chat, and Laura, you said that sometimes you're a stressed passenger in a vehicle, so solitaire becomes something that helps you.
Helps our
Mark,
marriage as well.
yeah, passenger stress definitely can cause some marital struggles.
Yeah,
Um,
keeps you off the imaginary breaks.
yes. And Margot added, most libraries now have coloring books and puzzles to borrow. Absolutely. So this is becoming more of a thing where we have access to some of these low-tech tools as well. So before we go on, again, I'm going to just take a second here. And as we're moving forward, go ahead in this chat and tell me, what is your favorite low-tech way of helping support your mental health? So whether that is your own anxiety, whether that's when you're dealing with some depression, when there's some big changes in your life, what is your go-to low-tech tool for yourself? Personally, I will say if I have access to paper clips, I love linking and unlinking paper clips. It's a personal fidget. I often will keep paper clips in my pocket, and that becomes a fidget thing for me. I love the ideas. Okay, so we have smelling things, and sometimes my people to regulate, painting or golfing. Okay, so like either something very artsy focused or getting out and doing something big outside, like golfing. Lavender, so the smell, a spinning ring, right? It's perfect. That's a great tech tool. So just that ring that can kind of spin around. Leg bouncing. We even got a ha with that one. I feel like, Rick, maybe your whole monitor is bouncing a little bit right now. Coloring, piece of chocolate. Okay, so again, a very sensory thing. It's sweet, it melts, it's got that first snap of bite. Absolutely. Watering plants or breathing exercises. Absolutely. A lot of people have really become sort of taking care of plants is very calming, very soothing. Cloud gazing on drywall. I would love to hear more about what that is, Catherine. I'm assuming that's maybe like a daydreaming type thing. If it's not, I really want to know because I have some drywall work I have to do. So, there's something fun about that. Humming a deep, low tune. Okay, so doing some humming, stimulating that vagus nerve. Doodling in meetings. Severe ADHD keeps me focused. Doodling is great, actually a great story. And if you were in college with me, I apologize for this. I was a big doodler in college because it helped keep me focused. And so I would write the ABCs as capital as I could, and then as small as I could, and then loopy, and then the happy birthday song over. I had a whole notebook full of this over and over again. And people thought I was taking really good notes. So when there was group work, they would ask to be in a group with me because I took such great notes. And then they would see the notes and then they weren't as excited about being in a group with me anymore. So I definitely feel that one. Print by number app on the phone. Awesome. And chocolate. Walking and playing with dogs. Absolutely. Dogs are great. Cold water reset. Ooh, I couldn't do that one, Nicole. Go you. Cold water seems like a lot to me, but I have definitely met people that it makes a big difference for. Reading, playing with fidgets, poppet, solitaire. Another solitaire person, Laura. Going for a walk, walking my dogs, going outside. Permanent wedding ring is a flexible one. So fidgeting with a ring again. Narrated scripture, which is set to music, listening to music, playing a game of cribbage. Clicking an open and closed pen, petting a cat, a smooth rock. Okay, so smooth rock on your desk to play with. I may or may not have one of those right here. I have that one. Uh, Squeezable Tama eggs. If Stacy, I am not sure exactly what kind of egg that is, but I'm definitely going to look that up. Clicking the pen. And Catherine, okay, we're talking about drywall mudding. Looking at finished drywall very closely and imagine they're different things. Oh, I love it. Okay, so basically, instead of having clouds outside, if you're stuck, you're looking at the drywall to see what sort of designs might be there. And then we have talking to a friend. So just in this group, look at the wide variety of skills that we have developed around our own mental health. And most of this, again, everything we listed here was around the idea of low tech. So not needing access to some sort of high tech tool. Now, the other thing I want to point out about what you guys just said, a lot of what you just said was strategy based. So it wasn't reliant on a specific tool. We just actually had Catherine that said if she doesn't have access to clouds, she uses drywall. So what really is happening here is she uses time to focus on something to look for pictures or images or patterns, right? That is the skill that helps her. So that could translate then to outside, right? Looking at the clouds. It could translate to the drywall, but that could also then translate into different high-tech apps where maybe they're look and finds, right? Or different activities that really cause you to do that focused looking, right? Now, when we're talking about people that like different smells, right? Low tech, obviously, we have got candles, we've got lavender incense, we've got, room air fresheners, but that can also be going into different sorts of, air mists that maybe get sprayed at certain times of day so that your house has that smell when you walk in to the house. Or in a different scenario, you carry the glue stick with you, right? So that you can have that smell with you. So we can take those things that are low tech for you and maybe only work in certain scenarios because that's where you have access to them. And we can look at how can we take that skill or those access things and take them into either high tech or a different environment in a different way. So a lot of times we'll start with what already works for a person, and then we'll talk how can we build upon that? Because people that, we're working with who are struggling with mental health, odds are they already have some things that they do that help or have helped for them in the past, and they just may not be enough right now. Or it may be that in their new environment, they can't do that anymore. So thinking about Laura's loan officer, if he wasn't comfortable pulling out a glue stick in the middle of a meeting, it may be him identifying what smell that glue stick is or what other smells are similar and getting some sort of air freshener in his office so that smells around more. So we can look at other ways to access that same level of mental health support in a unique or different way. So let's start talking now about more of the high-tech tools, because again, most of us are pretty comfortable with the low-tech things, right? We know that it typically involves our senses. So either sight, like looking at drywall, smell, like sniffing a glue stick, taste, like eating some chocolate. I love that chocolate, like usually I've got somebody that's like gummy bears or something chewy. I love that the examples today were all chocolate. I'm completely there for that. Um, or something that is more tactile, like going for a walk, petting a dog, petting a cat, right? Fidgeting. So we know that, we kind of are pretty versed at those. But more and more, we are having access to these high-tech tools. So we're going to spend a lot of the time in the second half of today's presentation talking about apps, right? Extensions, websites, tools that can help with mental health, primarily so that we can build everybody's toolbox out so that when you are supporting somebody with mental health needs, you have some things that you can sort of reach in and know exist. Now, are you going to know every detail about all of these? No, but I did provide links for you so you can definitely click around and check on your own. Um, but I want to make sure that you have sort of a starting place. Okay. Now, pros and cons. When we're talking about apps or high-tech tools, it's important for us to acknowledge that technology can be sort of I'm gonna go with the word addicting, right? It can be a place to hide. That's why social media, creators, social media companies can make the money that they do, right? You can jump on your phone for just a couple of seconds on a social media app to look at something, and suddenly an hour and a half just disappeared, right? So we do run that risk if somebody who is dealing with anxiety or depression or other mental health needs and avoidance or withdrawal is sort of where they're at. We need to be aware that if we are handing them a device and saying, we're going to use this tool on the device, that we do risk them getting lost in that technology. So as we do this, we need to be very conscious and very intentional about how we're teaching the use of this and the strategies that we're using. Oftentimes, if we're looking at an app on a phone, we may also look then at putting some time limits on the phone. So most phones have settings in them where you can say, okay, I want social media apps to be limited to 15 minutes a day. And after that, it's going to pop up and remind the person using the phone that their time is up. Now, obviously, especially when we're working with adults, they have the option to go around that at any point. But sometimes it's just having that reminder that says, wow, you really did spend that much time on that app. Okay. So when we're looking at apps, we want to be aware that there are a lot of pros. Apps are easier to use than ever, right? These are super simple. It used to be that if you wanted to do some sort of daily check-in on how you're feeling and then track that, you'd have to write it on a sheet of paper and then maybe make some sort of spreadsheet and then design some sort of graph. Now you can literally track how you are feeling every day and look for patterns by clicking twice a day, once to get into the app and once picking your mood, right? Super easy. Apps are also incredibly portable. So typically these will go on a phone, sometimes on a tablet, but it can be in your pocket. This can give you your journal in your pocket. This can give you a mood tracker in your pocket. This can give you a visual timer in your pocket, right? It can go with you everywhere. It's also great that one of the nice things if we're looking at an app-based solution is the price is typically pretty reasonable. Now, it's important to know that there can be ongoing subscription fees, but as opposed to buying a standalone anything, right? There's a lot of different biofeedback sensors out there and a lot of different wearables and a lot of different things that are going to be way more cost prohibitive than an app subscription. Now, there are some cons to these. So one of the first ones is a limitation of a platform. So there have been many people over the years that I've worked with, and we find an Android app that works really, really well for them. And they're consistently using it, and it's going really, really well. And then the sibling that they're on the cell phone account with decided everybody's upgrading to an iOS device, and now that app is no longer on that device. Okay. And now they don't have access to it. So it's important for us to know when we're looking at apps, do they work across multiple platforms? And if there's any potential of that app going away or the individual switching devices, go back to that idea that we really should be making sure that we are focusing heavily on the idea of teaching the skill of using the app and identifying the features of the app that the person's using regularly. Because in most scenarios, if there's an app that does one thing on Android, there's going to be something comparable on iOS and vice versa. It just may have a different character or a little bit different layout, but we're going to be able to find something that does something similar. The other thing we want to be aware of is free versus paid. So if you visited the App Store recently and search mental health, it is a rabbit hole. And I do this. I go through the App Store probably once every 3 months looking for all of kind of the new things that are out there so I can download them and try them all out and click on all the things. But there are so many free apps out there. There's also a plethora of paid apps out there. We want to be aware when we're looking at considering free versus paid, what we're picking and why. Free is great. I'm all for free. Free is wonderful. But a few things to be aware of. If we are looking at recommending or teaching or using a free app, either with ourselves or for somebody else, it's important to understand that the app developer either has to do something to make money from that app or they're volunteering their time. So if it is a free app, they have two options. They're either volunteering their time or they're finding a way to make money from it. If it's a matter of them volunteering their time, they likely are only going to volunteer their time for so long. So a free app tends to be more likely to disappear, right? So again, not saying you shouldn't use a free app, but again, that's where you really need to focus on the skills and the features of the app because that app is more likely to disappear than a paid app is. The other thing to keep in mind is the developer could be finding a different way to make money than making the app paid. And I'm guessing most of you have ran into this. Most times that's going to be some form of advertisement. Now, we could go into what sorts of advertisements are shared and whether we agree with that or not. But the more important thing is oftentimes the advertisements are set up specifically to trigger right before the part that the user wants to use the most. That's because that's the point where somebody's going to spend the time to watch the ad, right? So they're not going to just put the ad randomly. They're going to put it right before the spot that you really want to get to in the app. So usually the most useful part. So that means if you are working with somebody who's already struggling with executive functioning or motivation or withdrawal, they now have an additional barrier of watching a 30-second ad before they get to the thing that's going to help them. Okay. So again, I'm not saying don't ever use a free app, but you do need to be aware of those things so that you are working with somebody and teaching them the things that they need to know to be able to successfully use it. Okay. When we're talking about paid, again, the things you need to understand here is there's either going to be a one-time cost or there's going to be an ongoing subscription cost. So we need to make sure that people are aware. It's very easy to fall into some of these apps that have a free 30-day trial, which is wonderful. I love a free 30-day trial for an assessment. But we need to make sure that the individual has the funding to be able to continue to use the app long term, especially when we're talking about mental health. Now, this is always, but if you think about somebody that you're working with who's struggling with mental health, that tends to also, again, remember, cause difficulties with executive functioning, tends to cause some issues with self-advocacy, right? So if the app that's helping them suddenly stops working, does this person have the skills to reach out to whomever they need to reach out to obtain funding? So if this is being purchased through a care provider, if this is being purchased through a family member, when the app stops working, do they have the skills, right, to self-advocate and reach out to continue that funding? So we need to make sure that that piece is in place if it is a paid subscription app. Also being aware that more and more you're going to want to check in with people because it may start as a one-time purchase and then suddenly the features you need go to a subscription-based. Eventually, I'm pretty sure everything's going to be subscription-based. But right now, a lot of apps are starting that transition where you paid for the app, but now all of the features that people are using now suddenly are a subscription feature. So just keep an eye out for that and check in with people. And let's see, Rick just said that often when he's focusing on features, he tries to pick an app that will be around longer or is made by one of the bigger players. So he chooses to focus really in on, bigger developers that have been around for a longer time because they're less likely to just suddenly discontinue an app. And then bend the features to meet the goals. Okay, so this is then finding the features and then finding ways to use it, maybe not the way it was originally intended, but can we make it work? Okay, so here's where we're going to look at a few of these apps. Now, I'm not going to demonstrate every single one of the apps on here because we could be playing with them all day. But I do want to talk through some of these features and really talk about the different categories of apps. Because what happens here, I'm going to show you a few that I found to be beneficial, that people have had really good success with. But that being said, again, if you go into the App Store and you know what to search for, there's a lot more out there. And you can definitely take some time and, play with them on your own to discover what's here. But as we're talking about apps, we're going to sort of break them into categories. The first category that I want to talk about here are apps for breathing, relaxation, and meditation. And now some apps will provide a variety of things, right? So you might see meditation and journaling, or you might see breathing and something else together. But we really want to talk about what the focus is. So a couple of people in our talk earlier mentioned, right? I just spotted here. Laura also brought up a point. What data are they mining? Yes. What data are they taking from you? We definitely can have a whole conversation around that with apps, especially if they're free apps or paid. What are they looking for from you? So when we're talking about apps and when we're talking about low tech things earlier, some of you mentioned breathing, right? Taking deep breaths, taking a walk, right? Which is kind of a meditating. So something that calms you down, something that's repetitive, right? Something that helps you breathe deeply. So these are a series of apps that provide that. So I'm going to jump out here and I'm going to pop into just a couple of these. So the first one here is Headspace. And again, I just linked to it in the slide deck. But instead of taking a gazillion and a half screenshots and trying to share screen and things get ugly, I'm going to start this way with showing these to you just because as they update things, it works easier. I do have many of these apps also installed on a phone. So if you are near the end here when there's questions, if you have specific apps that you'd actually like me to open up and show you a specific feature of, I'm happy to do that. But I don't want to go into every one of them because we could be here all day. So this app is called Headspace. And what this does is provides you a lot of meditation resources. So this is going to sort of do meditation. It's going to do guided meditation. It's going to walk you through what meditation is. It's going to kind of give you specific ones for if you want to do this in a certain environment. So like maybe you are looking for meditations to help you focus or meditations for at work, right? So there's a variety of different ones here. This one has a cute little character, right? So it's called Ab, right? This is a little bit of an AI thing. Be aware. Okay, we always want to discuss what AI is doing with our information and what we're doing with it. That's a whole other conversation. But this is going to give you the little character Ab who's going to ask about your day. And some people just like having sort of that back and forth. It does really help, again, kind of that meditation. It carries over into bedtime to help you with like guided meditations for at night, helping with different soundscapes. And then again, the goal here really is to provide you with those meditations in different scenarios. Okay, so this is a paid app. Okay, kind of like some of the other ones. This one is paid. And what it's going to do again is really focus heavily in on the meditation piece. So if you are working with somebody that really needs someone to guide them through step by step in breathing exercises, this can be a really great app. The benefit of this one, I've worked with a couple of people who found a lot of help in the fact that this prompts you regularly to do the meditations. So where some meditation apps, you have to go into sort of looking for it, this one gets a little pesky and it will prompt you like, oh, make sure, how are you feeling? Make sure that you're doing your meditation. So it can be a little pushy, which for some people can be really, really good. Okay. Normally I don't like pushy, but for some people that extra prompt to do the meditation is important. Also, Calm. This one, most of us have probably seen before. Calm is a really big player in this space. Um, and this is, again, another one that's going to work you through meditations and mindfulness. It provides different sound backgrounds. It also provides the sleep. So it's very similar to Headspace. Okay. So again, same thing, really helping with the mindfulness, really helping with the sleep. Well, they used to have a big picture of it right here on the main page. And of course, now that I was just going to show it to you, it's going to be all advertisements and not show me the picture. Okay, fine. So again, most of us probably have seen this. The nice thing about Calm is where Headspace is Android and iOS, Calm also works in a web browser. So you can also use this on, for example, a computer at work without pulling out your phone. So this one works really well for people that maybe are experiencing a lot of anxiety in the middle of their work days. Calm tends to be one that a lot of employers are familiar with and comfortable with. So the website's not typically blocked. It is a paid app. Okay, so there's a paid subscription for it. Some employers actually provide it for employees, which is also great. But again, because it's just something you can go and sign into on the web and you can do those breathing exercises, it is something that's a little more acceptable at work than, for example, Headspace, which requires you to pull out your phone. Okay. Now, a couple of other ones here, and I'm just kind of close these up as we find them. Breathe to Relax. This one's a little simpler. Okay, so this is a free one, and this one is really basic. Okay, this one is going to just focus simply on breathing. So what you have literally are these three screens. You're going to pick breathe, and it's going to fill the bar to inhale, and it's going to make the bar go away to exhale. That's pretty much all it does. Once it's done with that, you're going to rate how your stress is so that you can track how is it working for you. So again, this one doesn't have all of the bells and whistles. And for some people who get really overwhelmed by all of the options and they really just need that support, this can be a great go-to. This one's also really nice if you have somebody who may get distracted on their phone, because Calm is going to kind of keep leading you into more and more exercises, where this one is simply breathe in and breathe out. Okay, so there's not a lot of extra stuff here. This one also is really helpful if you don't need the guided meditation. It's just the breathing. So for somebody that's identified that deep breaths really help, but they tend to sort of start hyperventilating because they're breathing in and out so quickly, this one is very, very helpful for that. Okay. Worry Watch. Now, this one is set up to be come back here, a watch app. I'm not going to click on this. So this one actually pairs up with your watch. And this one is going to do more of that meditation. So there is a anxiety journal. There is a mood journal. Okay. And then, oh, sorry, I don't want contact supports. And positive affirmations. So it's going to say, you know, some positive things. And this is going to be an app on your phone, and it's also going to come over to your watch. So if you have somebody that is using a watch, it's very helpful for that as well. Okay, it's one that kind of crosses. And then this one, I go back and forth on this one from a personal standpoint. I have seen this be incredibly beneficial for many people. And this is why the tools that we're talking about today are so personal, and it's so important that you know the person. Remember, when we're talking about the set person process, the student or person is first, because I, again, have seen this be incredibly beneficial for many people. It does not help me in any regards. Actually, I loathe this app. So what this is a very simple app, again. It's got some breathing supports to it, but the biggest thing that it has in it is this dot. So right now on the screen, there is a picture of a phone, and it's got a big red dot in the middle of it. And this is a free app, and the way this works is you put your finger on the dot, and then the dot starts to move around the screen. And your goal, so again, if you were somebody that is like focusing in on something really helps you calm, this would be a good one for you. So as the dot moves incredibly slowly, you need to keep your finger on it. And the longer you keep your finger on the dot, the bigger the dot gets. But if you move your finger off of the dot or you move your finger too quickly so you go over the dot shrinks back down smaller. That means you need to be very intentional and move very slowly in order to make the dot bigger. I can't handle it. I get, I can't. For those of us that are the big leg shakers and fidgeters, this can be very difficult. But for people who really benefit from that slowing down, right? People that are really benefiting from things like look and finds or looking at drywall or slower repetitive motions, this is a wonderful app. Okay. So let's go ahead. Oh, I want to, yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and kind of look at the next area. So the next area I want to talk here is about habit tracking. So the first whole section of apps that we talked about were, sorry, slideshow. The first whole section of apps that we talked about were apps for breathing, right? Breathing, relaxation, right? That guided meditation. So that's one area that we might work with people on. Another area when we're talking about mental health is acknowledging the habits that we have in our days. So oftentimes when we're struggling with mental health, remember our executive functioning system starts to struggle. And then we start doing things like we don't take care of ourselves as well. Our space becomes messy. Okay. I know that I personally am someone, if the space that I'm in, so if the office space is getting cluttered and out of hand, it causes me to not be able to focus as well. And it causes an increase in anxiety for me. But as soon as someone's struggling with mental health, that's one of the first things that starts to fall apart is that organization, that time management, which all goes into our habits and our cleaning. If you're working with someone with mental health needs, or think of times yourself where, you say, oh, I'm just feeling really down lately. What are the first things people tell you? Are you sleeping enough? Are you drinking enough water? Are you eating healthy? Are you getting outside? Right? All the things that we know actually help, but you can't do in the moment. So these habit trackers can be a really great way to help motivate people to do the things that we know need to happen in order to improve mental health. Okay. So there are a lot of habit trackers. You can use ones that, are just a sheet of paper and you can cross off things as you do them. The fun thing about the two that I'm going to show you here today is they're sort of gamified. So if you have not had any experience with gamification, it's basically the idea of taking something that you have to do and making it fun, making it a challenge, making it into a game. So Headspace, remember earlier, we talked about Headspace. This one, in addition to having those guided meditations, it will also work through habits with you. So you can also say what it is you're wanting to accomplish, and it's going to prompt you during the day to do it. Okay. The second one here, and this is one that actually my daughter brought up to me because it was one of her little favorites, is Habit Rabbit. Okay. Now, one would think that this would only work with kids because it's a cute little bunny, but I have had many adults find a lot of success with Habit Rabbit. So the way Habit Rabbit works, exactly like the picture here, you get a little rabbit character and he gets his own room. And then you list in what habits you want to have in a day. And then as you do them, you get to get additional things for your rabbit space. So you get to sort of decorate the rabbit's room. And up here on the top, if you're looking, so this is a screen. It's got a little bit of a animated bedroom. It's got a rabbit on the screen, a little animated rabbit. And in the upper left of this phone screen, it's got your energy. It's got how many carrots you have. It's got your health, so the little heart, and then what level you're on. So you have to take care of your rabbit and do all of your day-to-day habits in your life and check them off so that your rabbit is happy. So again, it's a simple little thing, but because of the level of gamification, it can be very motivating for someone to keep up with it and keep doing the habits that you know that need to happen in order to feel better. So I've worked with people who will use this for like drinking enough water, getting outside every day, picking up their room. Okay, so any of those things just to kind of get into the simple habit of doing the things that need to be done. Okay. Now, someone just mentioned in the chat, is Habit Rabbit similar to Finch? Yes, Finch does a little more, and we're going to talk about it in just a minute. So great tie-in for that one. So yes, Alyssa, we will be talking about Finch. So then we went through two different areas. I'm going to flip back, so don't get nauseous as I'm moving the screen. So far we've talked about tools and apps for breathing, relaxation, meditation. We have talked about a couple for habit tracking. And now we're going to go kind of the next step. We're going to talk about mood tracking. So this is a little bit different than habits. So with these particular line of apps, we're not looking at, are we doing these things every day like we would with a habit tracker? A mood tracker is to help us identify how we are feeling so that we can learn about patterns. So this works really well for someone. A lot of times we'll use this if someone is experiencing a lot of anxiety or a lot of really big emotions, and they're not necessarily able to figure out why, okay, or when. And a lot of times then we'll start working with a mood tracker because it helps people identify, are there certain days of the week that are harder for me? Okay, if so, why? For example, I have a loved one, and this is just kind of a story that kind of shows how we feel about things, who had just an awful week at work. Every day I would hear like this thing happened and this thing happened. And it was pretty significant stuff, like involving trips to the ER type stuff. Um, and they would talk about how all of these things happened in the day. And then they would look at me and say, well, it was a good day. And I'm like, that wasn't a good day. Nothing that you just said was positive. And I appreciate that you're trying to be optimistic, but it really wasn't a good day. And we have people who will tend to mask their mental health needs and their struggles by just saying it was okay. It was good. It was fine. I got through it, so it was good. A mood tracker is going to help people identify their emotions on a more regular basis. So it's going to, on a regular basis, ask how they're feeling so they can start identify where are their areas that they are struggling with. Because we can't work on the struggles if we can't identify them. Okay. There's also a whole body of research out there, which is very interesting, is if you have a bunch of bad things happen and you can lump them all together as it was a bad week, it's easier for your brain to handle than focusing in on all of the little bad things that happened. But if you get in the habit of doing that, you run into the opposite, which is good things that happen become more impactful if we can think about each individual good thing that happened. Okay, so follow that. If we group things together, it makes our brains easier. Okay, it makes it easier for our brains to handle them. So it was a bad week. It was a bad weekend. But if we just come back and do the opposite and say, well, it was a good weekend, we're not getting all of the benefit of each of the good little things that happened during that time. Things are more impactful when we can remember them as individual events. So oftentimes when we're working with mood trackers, we'll start with the mood tracker just regularly documenting. And then a lot of times people benefit by going back and reflecting on the good things that are in their mood trackers, what things made them happy, and then talking about them or thinking about them at the end of the day. And oftentimes, if you're dealing with mental health, you may be kind of going through the day to just get through the day. But by using a mood tracker, we can also work on those skills of reflecting on what good things happened in our day. So let's take a look at a couple of these. They're all fairly similar. They have slightly different pieces here and there. So let's go ahead, and this one is called Mood Track. This one is pretty basic, and it really focuses on the graphing. So I have people that really like this one because it sort of shows just the up and down line, like just the graph. They like the very basic, and it's not as pesky. This one's not going to prompt you as much. It's just going to allow you to come in and track how you're feeling. Pretty basic. I have some people that really like it for that. They don't want all of the bells and whistles and cutesy characters, right? They just want to track their moods. And so this one is great for that. So right now the phone on the screen is just showing a line going up and down with different moods over time. It also has a bunch of words that sort of create a word cloud. So the word happy is bigger than the word good or nervous. So as words are used more to describe how you're feeling, they get bigger or smaller depending on how frequently they are used. So again, a really basic app, but a lot of people who don't want all of the cutesy stuff do really well with this one. We also have Daily Bean. Okay, and I'm just going to zoom in here a little bit on this one. So this is a free app. It does have some paid features. And this one crosses that line into cutesy just a little bit more. So on the screen right now is a picture of a phone screen, and it has little green or gray circles that are currently wearing little Christmas outfits. So there's the cutesy part. So this one is Daily Bean. It's going to prompt you every day to say how you're feeling, and your bean is going to be a different color based off of how you're feeling. So over time, you see your calendar sort of fill in with all of these little beans showing you how you're feeling. This one is super easy. Again, it's just once a day, tap how your day was. It gives you the little bean and it shows the little counter. So this one crosses that line into slightly more cutesy. Again, they're decorated with little Christmas outfits on right now, but it doesn't go into having a big character or AI anything to interact with. Okay. Reflectly. This one kind of crosses the line into journaling, and we're going to talk about journaling in a minute. This app focuses on how you're feeling, but then also gives you a little more space to be able to share why you are feeling the way you are. You're going to also notice that this one is one of them that starts crossing that line into some more of that AI stuff again. So this one is going to take what you are saying about your day, okay, and how you're feeling, and it's going to help start making suggestions about what you could do to feel better. So it's going to notice that you maybe usually don't feel as great in the afternoons, and it's going to point that out to you and kind of make some suggestions for you to help make your afternoon better. So this one, again, takes those last two and sort of takes them a step further. So now you're tracking every day how you're feeling, and it gives you an opportunity to journal about it. And then it's going to start giving you feedback based off of that. Now, I have had a couple of people do really well with this one because it's very simple to use. But I also have some people that get a little nervous about the AI recommendations and are kind of, I don't really want to go that far. So that's where it's important for us to have some more of those basic, like Daily Bean and the Mood Flow ones, because they don't cross that line into the AI piece. So it's important that we keep in mind what all of those things are. Now, somebody just asked in the Slack, are all of these apps free? Some are not. So here at last check, now these change frequently. So at last check, Daily Bean is free. It does have a paid upgrade option. Reflectly is a paid app. Mood Track is still free. Last I used it. And Mood Flow apparently went away in the last 5 days since I last used it. Okay. I will check that one out in a little bit and update the link in here if I can figure out what happened to Mood Flow, because it apparently maybe is one of those that just went by the wayside. So these are not all free. Some of them are subscription based, some of them are free. I used to put that on the slides, and I actually stopped putting it on here because about the time I'd put it on the slides, they would change. They're all changing very rapidly to some form of payment. So the best thing you can do if you're checking it out is to just punch it up in a web store or go to the link here and find it, because again, by the time I say it's free or it's this price, they've changed it on me. Most of them, like Habit Rabbit, will have a free option, but then you can pay more for more features. Okay, Calm, same thing. You can get some basic Calm stuff, usually for free, but to have all of the features, it is a subscription. Okay, so I'm sorry it's not a super clear answer. I can say no, they're not all free, but the prices of them change all the time. So once we kind of move on from that mood tracking, okay, so we've talked about breathing, relaxation, meditation. We've talked about apps for habits. We've talked about apps for mood tracking. Then we kind of lump them together. And this is where that Finch one you asked about lives. So these apps kind of go a step further and they move into the area of self-care. So these are more broad apps. So these are typically going to have some feature of habit tracking. They're going to have some feature of mood tracking. They're going to have some features of journaling or breathing exercises. They're really created more to have all of those features together in one app. Because these are created for this purpose, they do tend to have a fee schedule to them, so they are usually a subscription based. And these usually are a little more intense to use because they're not just used for one thing. There's lots of layers to it, but they're also tend to be a little more engaging. Okay, so I'm going to jump back to I am last. First, I want to talk about Finch, which is over on the side of the screen. So Finch is a little bird. Okay, he looks kind of like a little penguin on the screen here. And with Finch, what you do is create a list of habits or goals you have for your day. So right now on the screen, it says get out of bed, brush your teeth, wash your face. So you can set up what goals you want. So they can be self-care for people that need it. They can be work related. There can be exercise related. So it allows you to really customize what you'd like to do. Then as you do those things, your little finch gets energy. And he starts off as a baby finch, and then he gets more and more energy and he goes on daily adventures, and then he grows bigger. So you get to kind of grow your own little penguin bird finch. Okay. Now, the other features of this that really are beneficial, and I'm seeing a couple of people put Finch into the chat that they like it and benefit from it. Alyssa, is Pickles, you say in the chat that you love your little Pickles. Is Pickles your finch, your bird? Curious. Okay, so then what this does is you can go on different quests. You get points for doing the different things that you then have a little shop. So you can go shop for different things to decorate your finch's room. You can get different clothes for your finch. And you also can have friends. So if you have family members that also have finch or friends that also have finch, you can share your information, and then you can ask for reminders from the other person to encourage each other, or you can send them positive things or little gifts. Okay. So it allows you to kind of have the the gamification of that self-care piece. Okay, and Alyssa just updated us. Yes, Pickles is the Finch, and her daughter loves to shop. Absolutely. So Alyssa pointed out she's just using the free version. Free version is wonderful. There's actually a lot in the free version for Finch. In order to do all of the things, there is the paid, but there are a lot of things in free. So I've seen people use both with this and have had success with both. It does prompt you every day to remind you to use it. So it is just pesky enough to get people to go back into it. Okay, so I've had a lot of people, Finch has become very popular lately. Another one is Quabble. Again, this is more of, it's geared to be a little less cutesy, gamey, and a little more support. Okay, so it's going to be a little more supportive. Their tagline here is, "You're not alone in your hard times," right? And this one, the main character is a duck. And here again, it's really to help you focus on what you need to do to feel better and get support when you need it. Now I'm going to duck out of this one. I'm going to kind of go out here to Quabble. And again, you're going to kind of see the same thing. It's not identical to Finch, but it's going to have some of the same things. You're not going to necessarily decorate him as much, but you've got different mind activities that you're going to do. So here it's how are you feeling? It's going to ask you to do your journaling, your meditation. It's got some mood tracking to it. And as the pictures scroll by here, you can see that it's going to focus in on gratitude, and you've got your really cute little duck character. Okay, so apparently birds are the go-to right now for mental health apps. We've got finches and ducks. Okay. Now, if you're looking for something that's just a little more straightforward for self-care, there's also an app called I Am. And this one isn't going to go into all of the habits and all of the gamification. This one really focuses in on affirmations. So it's going to give you a positive affirmation every day on your phone, tablet, watch. Okay. So this one's goal is to just give you a positive mantra each day. Now, I've worked with some people that this is really beneficial for them, just having something positive to start their day that they're going to reflect back on throughout the day. Okay. And it sounds kind of silly because it's just a little thing. But this can make a really big difference for some people who just are really stuck in the cycle of negative self-talk, thinking on those negative thoughts over and over again. This one is just a really great way. We have had people that just go and like search for affirmations and then write them down. But after about a month, going out to the internet to look for affirmations tends to be more of a distraction and barrier. So just something that brings them to you every day can be incredibly helpful. Okay. So we have one person mentioning that it's difficult to suggest apps because a lot of the adults that they work with already have a therapist. So they share app ideas, but also clarify that they're only suggestions. So it's also difficult to recommend funding if they have external mental health support. So frequently, I also just feel sometimes I'm stepping out of the role if I'm doing mental health suggestions. Perfect. No, I think this is wonderful. So really great question. So we definitely can walk the line when we are talking about assistive technology for mental health. Because as we said at the beginning, a lot of the people we work with are already working with doctors. They're already working with somebody for their mental health. And when that occurs, a lot of times, really what we'll do, especially what I will do, is really focus in on what's the role of assistive technology to cross that line because they already have a specialist that they're working with in that area. So you are 100% correct. Really, I try to stay in the line of, is there a tool or assistive technology support that's needed to reach your goals that you're working on with these other providers? And sometimes there's not. But sometimes we are more aware of the tools and those supports that can support their goals that they're working on. As far as funding goes, funding can be an interesting scenario. Sometimes funding can come if it's for employment. We can get funding support through a DVR. Sometimes funding support will come through a managed care organization if somebody is set up with those. Sometimes I've reached out to the companies to kind of explain who I am and, assistive technology, and do they have ideas, or some of the programs like Calm will have grants available for it. So sometimes funding can get a little creative. Sometimes we just acknowledge we need to go with a free app. If somebody doesn't have any funding available anywhere, then we need to live in that free area and really talk to the individual about what do we need to be aware of with it being a free app. So I don't have an all-out magical answer for that question other than how we work with our colleagues. And Jerry just brought two, recommending that they talk with their therapist to ensure the app supports the work and is consistent. Absolutely. So again, we are going to be coming in from the AT standpoint saying, if you're working with a specialist, what are you working on? Is that working for you? If we're getting called in, odds are something's not working somewhere. And we can make some recommendations. But again, it's always best for them to take it back to make sure that it is doing what it is they need it to do. If they're not working with a counselor yet, if there are some things that they're wanting to try, especially when you're working with adults, they can choose to try some of these things. I've already seen a couple people in this group saying, hey, I'm going to try that. We have the option to try things, and that's wonderful. So it may be something that they try while they're waiting for a counselor, right? But for me, I'm not a counselor. So I'm going to know the tools, know what the goals are of the person, and then know what tools work for that. But if they're working with a specialist in a certain way, we definitely want to make sure that we are suggesting that they communicate that with the person that they're working with. Now, I want to take a little bit of time here and look specifically at executive functioning, because again, we say that if somebody's struggling with mental health, executive functioning is going to be something that they struggle with. If they're struggling with executive functioning, that can cause mental health struggles. And I love that Anna had put in the chat a little bit ago that they use Skylight Calendar. This is a great tool. If you've not seen it yet, this is basically a big Android tablet, basically is what it looks like. And it has a calendar, but then it also has digital access to checklists, to-dos. Anna's saying that they use self-care activities in the Skylight Calendar. So they earn stars and rewards for doing the lists on that calendar. Okay, so it's not quite the gamification level of like a Finch with a cute little character, but it's a way for a family or a pair of people or even one person to track everything on one big calendar. I actually will talk about the Skylight with people who are struggling with executive functioning because it can give them sort of all of the tools in a big visual way, along with their calendar and their to-do lists. So if somebody's struggling with mental health and we're seeing things start to fall apart, okay? So we're seeing that they're late for work, they're forgetting materials, they're missing deadlines, their, area is a mess and it's not normally. We might want to take some time to look at supports for executive functioning. So here we're going to focus in on calendars, calendar apps. So teaching people how to use built-in calendar apps can be a wonderful starting point. Now, there are a lot of really fun calendar apps that do a lot of crazy things, but oftentimes just teaching someone how to use the existing calendar on a device that they have can go a long way. A good majority of people do not fully understand how to use their calendars. So the fact that they can set alarms before events, that they can set reminders a day before an event, that they can add details about driving directions to an event can go a long way to take the time to teach them how to use that successfully. In most phones, tablets, Chromebooks, computers, there are apps that are built in for reminders, so alarms and different reminder checklists, and also to-do lists. Okay, so using again the features that are already existing on a device, but taking the time to work with the person to show them how to use it well can go a really long way. So this is one of those scenarios where it may not even be that we need to do any purchasing. It may be that they need the more of the assistive technology service of learning how to actually use the features of the tools that they already have. Now, we talked earlier about, the fact that anytime we are working with high tech and app-based tools, that we run the risk of sort of losing people into, high tech digital land, where there's distractions of social media or videos or, games. And so that's where I like taking a little bit of time to talk with people about some of the focus apps that are out there. Now, there's a lot of them out there. These are four that are favorites that I've had the most success with, but they're always changing. There's always more out there. There's also, again, the built-in focus features on your devices. Okay, so hold on. So here, I want to poke at just a couple of these for a minute. We have a variety of focus apps. One of the first ones that came out a long while ago is called Forest. This one can be used on Chrome extension. It can be used on a phone. It can be used on a tablet. And what this does is allows you, there's a little picture of a phone here, and it says, it's got a little like a seedling, a little sapling in the middle, and it has a countdown. It looks like it started probably at 30 minutes. So what you do is you say that you want to plant a tree, and it plants this little itty bitty seedling. And then your phone, basically, you can set it up to either allow only certain things or to block certain things. You could say, I just want to block Facebook, or you could say, I want everything blocked, but allow email. And then during that time, you can only access what you've allowed. If you choose to go somewhere else, it's going to come up with a reminder that tells you to stay focused. If you choose to give up, it's going to kill your little tree and it becomes a little dead branch. And it is amazing the number of people that will stay focused because they don't want to kill their little fake tree. Now, it also shows you, which makes it even a little worse, is it'll show you a little plot of land every week, and it'll show you all of your trees on it, including your live ones and your dead ones. So then you can see, nah, okay, I killed a lot of trees this week. Okay. Now, there are a couple other varieties that have come out after Forest, very similar. This one is called Focus Plant. This one, you get to pick a variety of different cute little animated plants that you can plant in your garden. And again, you get to water them and you get to grow them based off of the time that you focus. This one's free, does have in-app purchases, same as Forest. Avocado takes this to a little bit more of a animated cutesy standpoint. This one, again, you're going to plant fruits. So avocados, little peppers, little pineapples. And this one's going to track a little more, show your productivity, how often you stay focused. But instead of plants, you plant little fruit characters. Okay. And then I've had some people who don't like how cutesy that one is, and they're more about learning about the world. There's now one out called Focus Traveler. So this one is actually a little traveler person, and you pick the route you want to focus. And then as you focus, your little traveler travels on the route and tells you about the places that they're going. Okay, and they are real life places that it talks about. So this one, again, I've had some people that don't really want all the animated cute stuff, but they like learning facts about the different places and where they're going. And here you can set the focuses. Okay. Now, a couple of people here, Laura mentioned that Forest would work, and nursing an actual almost dead tree outside right now. And Margot said Focus Travel will work for me. Awesome. And then I'm not going to click into every single one of these, but I want you to be aware of support for journaling. So we know that a lot of people do well by writing out what's happening to them. And this is something that a lot of counselors will recommend. And then people will come to me and say, okay, I'm supposed to be writing this down, but I lose my notebook all the time. Like, what can I do here? So Apple has a built-in journal to it now. There are also a variety of them here, which I have linked for you. Again, I'm not going to click on all of these, but these are going to prompt you every day to journal, write about how you're feeling, how your day went. Some of them will give you prompts each day. And then we're going to also jump back low tech here. So if you are looking for some journal ideas for people who are just saying, gosh, I know I need to journal and I don't know where to start. These are two really great low tech ones. The first one is Heroes Journal. It is a print book. They've also given me access to a free download of um, the first book of this journal. So the link is in here. Feel free to download it. But what it is it's more like um, an animated journal. So you're supposed to be going on a quest. So it's a hero's journal. And it's got pictures every day and it asks about your quest. How did your quest go today? Right. So it makes journaling a little more fun. There's also Big Life Journal. This one is a little simpler. It's got more writing for you. So it's going to give you inspirational quotes and stories and a little less writing on your part. But both of these I've had a lot of luck with. A couple of other things that I kind of want to talk about here as we're kind of starting to get to that wrap up time is emergency chat. So for some people, when they are dealing with a mental health crisis, they may struggle with being able to process auditory input or being able to speak out loud. This app was created by an individual who had this issue and needed a way to be able to communicate. This is a free app. It allows you to customize a message when you open it up. For instance, right now it says, I gave you the phone because I can't use or process speech right now, but I'm still capable of text communication. And so then it says, please keep calm and proceed to the next screen, which has a simple chat client. So all this does is opens up a screen that looks like a text message conversation back and forth, but it's not being sent anywhere else. So the person can type into it and hand you the phone. You can type into it and hand the phone back, and it will allow you to have that conversation without any auditory speech. Okay, so it's a really great way for somebody who struggles with speech input or output when they are in a crisis place. Also, built-in phone apps. I don't know why that stayed on the screen, but great. Built-in health apps. It's always worth exploring what people already have. So Apple Health, Samsung Health, Health Connect, these are all built in to different devices. So for example, Health Connect is on Google. Samsung has its own proprietary health app, Apple Health. This is going to give you a way to sort of track your sleep, track your energy levels, track your exercise, all in a device that somebody likely already has. And then I need to spend my one little moment here in AI land. And this is the tool goblin.tools. If you have not seen this one yet, this one's kind of fun. It's one of the AI tools, one of the only ones that I tend to recommend. This is a collection of simple tools that allow you to break things down. So, for example, for somebody who is struggling with big tasks and how to break it into smaller steps, you can tell it what you want it to do. So maybe I need to make supper, and that's feeling really overwhelming to me. I can hit the plus to add, and then there is a little magic wand. When I click on that, it's going to break that task down into steps for me. So I need to check the ingredients I need for supper. I need to gather the ingredients. I need to prepare any ingredients that require washing, peeling, or cutting. So it's going to walk through all of the steps of how to do this. So it doesn't feel so overwhelming. Okay. There is also a formalizer. I'm not going to do this one right now because this can get very distracting, but it will allow you to take your text and make it sound more professional or less professional. Um, it can also make it more snarky, which is a really good time. But the one that I tend to use a lot for people who are struggling with mental health is Compiler. So this tool will allow somebody to talk through the overwhelm and then breaks it down for you. So for example, if I turn this on, we'll see if it works while I'm on Zoom. So I have had a really bad day today. There's so many things that need to get done, and I haven't accomplished any of them yet. I still need to clean the litter box, but I don't have any litters, so I need to go to the store to get that. And I haven't started anything for supper, so I'm going to have to find something for supper. The dogs need to get out. I can't believe I forgot about the presentation that I have tomorrow, so I somehow need to get that picked up. So I can speech to text just a big, long ramble about everything that's going on. And when I click turn into tasks, it's going to write that out and tell me what do I need to do. So for people who are feeling very overwhelmed and struggling with mental health, this is a really great free tool to sort of allow them to brain dump everything that they are stressing out about and actually make it into a list. Okay. Now, the app version of this is now paid. The web-based version of this is still free. Okay, so a great, great tool. And there are other fun ones in here to use as well, but I'm focusing on the one that I use for mental health. We also have extensions, which most of you are aware of, work within your browser. I'm not going to go into a lot of details about these because they're pretty straightforward. It's just important to know that if somebody is working in a browser scenario for work or for school, or they're spending a lot of time on their computer, sometimes having tools that work right within the browser avoids the distraction of them moving out to other things or getting distracted by something like a phone. So there are extensions like Momentum, which provides a simple background every time a new tab is opened. Noisely, that allows you to have background noises. Growth Tracker, this is a browser-based mood tracker. There's also some meditation extensions that talk about different ways to meditate or different stretches. And then we always have wearables. So for some people, having something like a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or a Samsung Watch allows them to have some of these tools with them without needing to pick up their phone. So that can help with the distraction of having a device. It also makes it a little less conspicuous if you are at a meeting or if you are out somewhere. And that can do things like monitoring heart rate, sleep, breathing exercises, meditation, and tracking apps. Okay. Now, a couple of things that came in on the chat that I want to address. Laura just made a really good point. If you're talking about somebody, if you're using a work computer, so if you're working with somebody who's using a work computer or is using a computer at work, you do need to be aware of what extensions are allowed or not allowed. Okay. Now, if they're working on a personal computer, that's a different story. But if they're using a device at school or at work, you're going to always need to collaborate with the IT departments in those places. And that's a really great point. It really depends on, again, that environment. What is allowed in the environment? Somebody also asked about assistive technologies for individuals who benefit from body doubling. There are a couple of apps out there. I believe Doubly, Dubbli, is one that's out there right now that I've had some people have really good success with. There are also a lot of web-based resources for body doubling where you can sign in. I've got a couple of people that use that pretty regularly. I don't stay in front of one spot long enough to be able to use that personally, but I definitely have had some people have good luck with body doubling. And the last one, I just like putting this there because when we talk about situational anxiety and scenarios where people maybe struggle with mental health on a lower level, but then have those sudden needs, presenting is one of the times that that tends to pop up, where now for work or for school, they suddenly need to present, and now that has just overwhelmed everything else. So I like adding these two resources in here. Both of these are tools to help with presentation anxiety. So one of them, Present Pal, is going to help you prepare for your presentation by walking you through each of the steps, showing you what you need to do for each one. It's really geared for students. I have had a couple of adults use it as well. And it can really help with like what needs to be said on each slide, and then help with rehearsal. Speaker Coach also will help you. Again, with your PowerPoint, it's going to talk about how fast you are. It's going to tell you if you're using a lot of ahs, things like that in it. So I've had a couple of people that have benefited from these in the past when this has become something that is massively bigger. Yes, Laura, there is a new name and I'm not sure what it is. So Laura just mentioned in the chat, there's a new one by the makers of Glean. I don't remember the name of it offhand. I did hear
And this
about
is
it.
Laura. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't either. I saw it demonstrated at ATIA
yeah.
this week during their AT hours. So it helps people practice for their presentations.
Okay.
Thanks, Mary.
Cynthia
And
said,
Genio. Thanks, Miss Stephanie.
there we go. Okay. So there we go. We are now Genio now, which goes along with Glean. So Glean used to be more for note taking, and now they are also adding their new, so it's Genio Present now. Let's go here. Okay. So here we go. So yes, I have not played with this one yet, but I've heard from a couple of people that have explored it that it's good, but I have not had a chance to play with it. They kind of keep updating, and I haven't caught up with that one yet. So, looking at questions, it looks like Laura has something she wants to add about the funding and the counseling piece. So I want to make sure Laura has time to do that. And then if I think I got all of the questions, if there were any I missed, feel free to toss them into the Q&A with our last minute or two here.
And this is Laura. I do not. There was a question in the Q&A.
Mhm.
Someone anonymously asked if
Oh,
they find it challenging to support apps because many of the
yes.
adults I work with
I
are
thought
able
I
to.
thought I'd answered that one, but maybe I didn't all the way. So this is the one where I talked about that you really want to make sure that you are staying in the assistive technology line of things and make sure that, if somebody's coming to you and saying that they're working with a counselor and they're supposed to be doing, journaling and it's not working well for them, that's where we can come in and say, okay, there are some assistive technologies that can support journaling. Let's talk about if that's an issue of motor control or if you need an easier to use tool. And we can then go ahead and make some recommendations. But we do always suggest then that they go back and talk with their counselor to make sure that things are working together and the tools that we are saying they can do this skill with are going to meet the counseling needs. We also, from a funding standpoint, again, that can really be a wide variety of things from employer-based to DVR if it's for employment to managed care organizations. Some of the apps, I think I mentioned Calm, does have a grant that they give out sometimes for people that need additional funding. Or sometimes if there's no funding available, we do need to work with the free apps and then the restrictions that those do entail. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. If there are not any other questions, thank you so very, very much for having me. I love getting to talk about mental health supports, and I appreciate all of the engagement in the chat. That was very helpful to be able to see what people were thinking and where they were going with things.
Yes, thank you very much, Cassie. This is lots to think about and a lot to kind of research and play around with. So I wanted to thank everyone for attending. And just a reminder that when this webinar closes, there will be a survey that pops up. And obviously, we just want your general feedback. But if you are interested in CRCs or CEUs, there are some questions and some demographic information that you will need to complete. If you are zipping off to another meeting, you will also get that survey in an email tomorrow. And then following this presentation, I will be sending out the slide deck that Cassie had shared. I always wait till after because, as Cassie said, sometimes we have to modify our presentations right up until the last minute based on what's available. So I always like to make sure that we have the most current version to send out. So again, thank you. And then we will have another webinar, our fifth one next week, on AI and digital literacy and from the Wisconsin Literacy Organization. So hope to see some of you then. Thank you very much, Cassie, and everyone take care.
Thank you.